Hey guys, Dr. Carrillo here. First of all, I apologize that, oh my goodness, look at my crazy hair. I realize that I'm really appearing like really close up. I don't mean to be all in your face, but something's going on with my dot cam. I need to figure it out. It's zooming in really big and I can't minimize it. Okay, so I wanted to pause and just remind you to practice intellectual virtue. Remember that people who practice intellectual virtue are concerned with epistemic goods that have to do with knowledge. So truth, wisdom, evidence, and rationality. And that entails the intellectual virtues that you learned about. I want to remind you of how important the intellectual virtues are to not only learning the technical, critical thinking skills, but also in virtue of an ethics class, stretching one's intellectual and moral imagination. Remember that everything that I do is designed to help you in real life make sense of your own meaning-making lens, your own belief systems, but also those of others, especially as we see them on social media, the news, our politicians, and whatnot. Taking this class, I'm telling you, if you're really engaged with it, when you go to your next family dinner or Thanksgiving, wow, you're going to see people in a new way. So I challenge you, really learn the stuff, really get into it, and then see what notice. You're going to begin to see things with people's communication and thinking. And maybe you've already started to do this, as some of you have commented in the bundle wrappers. But imagine doing that at Thanksgiving. You're going to ask really good questions. I guarantee you, philosophy is known for teaching you to ask really good questions. Okay, so that said, as you can see in this last lesson on argument, we are still, of course, using, the killing of George Floyd and the aftermath. I know that I might be presenting some arguments towards which you have strong negative emotions or feelings, right? So you may even perceive some potential harm or threat, especially with the argument that we're about to analyze. So we're going to get into a complex argument too. We're only going through 2 more argument examples for our big review and lessons on argument. In this argument, somebody's going to be citing someone's belief about the Bible and their belief in the 10 Commandments as a source of moral knowledge, with a specific focus on the commandment, thou shalt not kill. Now, in this argument, the person is not attacking the person as a Christian or the belief in the Bible. What they're calling attention to is the consistency that the person has in their belief system. So I want you to imagine that the person who is speaking in complex argument number 2 is responding to the first complex argument. By the way, if we did not title the first complex argument, the one that we developed on page 1 of the document that you downloaded, if we didn't title that as complex argument number 1, go ahead and do that. So I want you to, and that's the one, where they said the claim, the final conclusion was that Derek Chauvin should be administered capital punishment by society. I want you to imagine that complex argument number 2 is someone responding to that. And what they're doing is they're reminding that person that they are a Christian who believes the Bible is the ultimate, source of moral truth or truth. And of course that entails belief in the 10 Commandments and the principle, thou shalt not kill. And so I just want you to know that. The argument is not meant to endorse Christianity nor to belittle it. This is the academic treatment, the formal study, the philosophical study of morality, of right and wrong, our beliefs about right and wrong. Think back to what you read about in the ebook and all the points that the author made about the importance of exploring our moral compass, our moral beliefs, the need to think critically about that. And so that's what the speaker is doing here. And you'll notice that the speaker is not doing what we see that is done so much in social media and by the politicians. The speaker is engaging in civil conversation, in civil discourse. This person, the speaker, even though the speaker has a different point of view, and maybe the speaker does think that Chauvin should be executed. He's not saying that he necessarily disagrees with that claim in and of itself. He's pointing out to the speaker, hey, you seem to have an inconsistency in your moral compass. You're saying you believe in the 10 Commandments, thou shalt not kill, but if you're saying that Chauvin should get capital punishment, aren't you saying that he should be killed? So then you're saying at the same time, I endorse the 10 Commandment, thou shalt not kill, but at the same time you're trying to make an exception to that rule and say he should be killed. So you see how there's a contradiction, right? Killing is morally permissible or the correct thing to do, versus, no, the Bible says killing is morally impermissible. It's never okay. It's always the wrong thing to do. So that's what the speaker is getting at. It could be that the speaker does think in complex argument number 2 that Chauvin should be executed. But that's not what the speaker is focused on. Maybe he just wants to point out that there's an issue to be resolved. So either the speaker is going to need to say, okay, I don't really endorse the 10th commandment, thou shalt not kill, because I understand that this is in the 10th commandment a universal absolute principle, and I want to make an exception. And so maybe there are Christians that say, well, I guess I do think there are exceptions to the 10th commandment, thou shalt not kill, but then you don't really endorse that 10th commandment. That commandment is what's called by Kant a categorical imperative. There are no exceptions to the rules. Do you see any ifs, ands, or buts in the 10 commandments? Thou shalt not kill unless you want to punish a police officer. No, it says killing is wrong, period. So that's an interesting perspective. And notice, again, I'm not attacking Christians. I'm just exploring. I'm wondering. There are philosophers who are Christians, including philosophers who teach at universities and colleges that are also Christians. And sometimes they'll just admit there's a problem and they have to accept it and that they have an inconsistency, a contradiction in their thinking, even though philosophers don't like to have those. Or they'll try to fix it somehow. They'll try to show why it's not really a contradiction. Okay, so that said, it's important to reflect intellectual courage if you're the kind of person who happens to be a Christian or believe in the Western notion of God, and you perceive that looking at this argument about endorsing a commandment, but then maybe there's a problem with your thinking, you're going to need to have intellectual courage because maybe you perceive a threat or harm to your meaning-making lens. You know, you don't want to rock the boat. You don't want your sacred ideas and what you have settled into as a a meaning-making lens for your moral beliefs. Okay, so you might need intellectual courage for that. We're all going to need intellectual empathy because we're entering into an argument. Again, it doesn't matter whether or not the argument, the position, or whatever, whether or not you endorse it or agree with it, you still reflect intellectual empathy, whether you agree with an argument or not, when you try to see what that person's reasons are for their conclusion. When you see what they focus on their reasoning, when you see how their reasons connect to all and any conclusions. And then in the process, of course, you also practice intellectual perseverance. So obviously complex arguments take a lot more physiological energy, right? A lot more physiological and psychological energy, focused, deliberately sustained effort. And then finally, hopefully, in reflecting these virtues, as we work through these complex arguments about a very controversial topic that brings up other controversial topics, sacred ideas, hopefully you will enjoy discovering things that you did not know about yourself and how others make sense of things. In other words, you will experience the bliss and the joy of intellectual humility. And so in working through these virtues and manifesting them, we can also express intellectual humility and enjoy the fruits of that. Our mind can expand in terms of intellectual and moral imagination. And as Russell says, it's a very cosmic statement. I'm still trying to make sense of it. But as the famous philosopher Bertrand Russell said, we are able, by allowing a different view or another's view, even if we agree with it, to enter into our minds. So for Russell, everything that is not currently understood or known or part of ourselves, when we allow it to enter into us, all that stuff that is not a part of us is not self. When we allow it to enter into our meaning-making system, even if we ultimately reject it, it becomes a part of our self. So not self becomes a part of self. And then, like I said, like I've repeated, our minds, our imaginations grow intellectually and morally, and we share in the infinity of the universe. All right, so I had to do that inspirational lecture because now we're going to tackle this argument.